The gun weighed heavy in Dalton Pierce's hand as he stared at the unmarked grave on the outskirts of Ardmore, Oklahoma. The summer heat of 1882 making the air shimmer like broken promises, and he wondered if the whiskey or the memories would kill him first. 3 years had passed since he buried his wife and infant son in the same week, cholera taking them both while he was away tracking outlaws for the marshal's office. He had returned to find their bodies already cold, the neighbors having done what needed doing because there was no one else. Dalton quit his badge that same day, took up work as a ranch hand, and built walls around his heart higher than the mesas that dotted the Oklahoma Territory. He spoke only when necessary, drank more than was healthy, and made damn sure nobody got close enough to matter. The Double R Ranch where he worked was owned by Robert Richardson, a fair man who paid on time and did not ask questions about a man's past. Dalton kept to himself, slept in the bunkhouse farthest from the main house, and avoided the social gatherings that happened on Saturday nights when the other hands would play cards and swap stories. He was good with horses, better with a rope, and the best shot on the ranch, which meant Richardson kept him employed despite his surly disposition and preference for solitude. It was mid-June when everything changed, though Dalton did not know it at first. He was breaking a stubborn mare in the far corral, sweat soaking through his shirt, when he heard the commotion near the main house. A wagon had arrived, fancy enough to turn heads, and Richardson was helping a woman down from the seat. Even from a distance, Dalton could see she was different from the weathered frontier women he was accustomed to seeing. Her dress was green, the color of new grass after rain, and her auburn hair caught the sunlight like copper wire. "That is the boss's niece," said Tommy Chen, one of the younger ranch hands who had wandered over to watch Dalton work. Tommy was half Chinese, his father having worked on the railroads before settling in Oklahoma, and he had a habit of narrating everything he observed. Came all the way from St. Louis. Her father died last month, left her with nothing but debts. Richardson is her only family. Dalton grunted, turning his attention back to the mare. Other people's tragedies were not his concern. He had enough of his own. But fate, or perhaps just Richardson's practical nature, had other plans. That evening, as Dalton was walking back from the creek where he had washed the day's grime away, Richardson called out to him from the main house porch. "Pierce, got a minute?" Dalton considered pretending he had not heard, but Richardson was a decent boss, so he altered his course and approached the house, stopping at the base of the porch steps. He never went inside if he could help it. Houses were for families, and he was not family to anyone anymore. "Need you to do something for me," Richardson said, leaning against the porch rail. He was a man in his 50s, gray threading through his brown hair, with the kind of steady gaze that came from years of reading men and horses with equal skill. "My niece, Sophia Langford, she is going to be staying here for a while. Maybe permanently, we have not decided yet. She wants to learn about ranch life, says she is tired of city living and wants to be useful." Dalton's jaw tightened. "What has that got to do with me? I want you to teach her how to ride properly, how to handle livestock, basic survival skills. You are my best hand, Pierce, and I trust you to keep her safe while she learns." "No." The word came out flat and final. Richardson's eyes narrowed. "I am not asking, Dalton. I am telling you, this is part of your job now." "Then I quit." Dalton turned to walk away, but Richardson's next words stopped him. "She lost her father 5 weeks ago. Came home from the market to find him collapsed in his study, heart just gave out. She is alone in this world except for me, and she is trying her damnedest to build something new from the wreckage. I figure you of all people might understand that." Dalton's hands clenched into fists. It was a low blow, and Richardson knew it. But it was also true, and that made it worse. "I am not a teacher," Dalton said without turning around. "Maybe not. But you will do this anyway because underneath all that bitterness, you are still a decent man. Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock by the horse barn. Do not be late." Dalton walked away without agreeing, but they both knew he would be there. Quitting would mean moving on, finding new work, maybe going to a new town. It was easier to just do what Richardson wanted and keep his distance from the woman while doing it. He could teach her the basics, stay professional, and maintain the walls that kept him safe from caring about anyone ever again. Sleep did not come easy that night. Dalton lay in his bunk, listening to the other hands snoring, and thought about auburn hair and green dresses, and how some people still had the luxury of starting over. He had tried that once, after the deaths, tried to imagine a future without Sarah and little Daniel in it. But the future was just an empty room he had no desire to enter, so he stayed perpetually in the present, moving through each day with mechanical precision, and feeling as little as possible. 7 o'clock came too soon. Dalton was already at the horse barn when Sophia Langford appeared, and he had to revise his initial impression of her. Up close, she was not delicate or pampered as he had assumed. Her green dress had been replaced with a practical split riding skirt and a simple white blouse, her hair braided and pinned up sensibly. Her face was more striking than pretty, with high cheekbones and a determined set to her jaw. But it was her eyes that caught him off guard, gray-blue like storm clouds, and when she looked at him, really looked at him, Dalton had the uncomfortable sensation that she was seeing things he had worked hard to hide. "You must be Dalton Pierce," she said, extending her hand like a man would. "Thank you for agreeing to teach me." "Did not agree," Dalton muttered, but he shook her hand anyway. Her grip was firm, her palm already showing the beginning of a blister. "You've been trying to work without gloves. I helped the cook bring in firewood yesterday. She said I did not need to, but I wanted to earn my keep." Sophia's voice had a slight rasp to it, as though she had spent time crying recently, and her throat had not quite recovered. "I know I am an imposition here. I intend to learn quickly and pull my weight." Dalton pulled his hand away and turned toward the barn. "First lesson. Out here, you wear gloves when working or you will tear your hands to pieces. Can't do much with damaged hands. Second lesson, I talk, you listen. You do exactly what I say when I say it. Horses are dangerous, cattle more so, and this land does not care about your intentions. Understood? Understood." Sophia followed him into the barn, where he had already saddled a gentle gelding named Copper. "Though I should mention I already know how to ride. I had lessons as a girl. City riding is not the same as ranch riding. You probably learned to prance around a park on some overfed mare. Out here, you need to ride for hours through rough terrain, manage livestock, and stay mounted when things go wrong." Dalton gestured to Copper. "Show me what you know." She mounted with reasonable grace, settling into the saddle with straight posture and collected reins. Dalton watched critically, then swung up onto his own horse, a rangy buckskin named Flint. Without warning, he nudged Flint into a trot and headed out of the barn, forcing Sophia to follow or be left behind. They rode for an hour through the ranch's eastern pastures, Dalton testing her ability to keep up, navigate uneven ground, and control her mount when cattle scattered across their path. To her credit, Sophia did not complain or ask for rest, though he could see her gripping the saddle horn when they crossed a steep ravine. When they finally stopped near a creek to water the horses, her face was flushed with heat and effort, but her eyes were bright with something like satisfaction. "You will do," Dalton said grudgingly, dismounting. "You got better instincts than most beginners, but you are too tense. You are trying to control everything instead of working with the horse, my instructor insisted. Louis said a firm hand was necessary, Sophia replied, climbing down less gracefully. Her legs were clearly not accustomed to so much riding. Your instructor was wrong. Dalton loosened Flint's cinch and let him drink. A horse can feel everything, your tension, your fear, your intentions. You want control, but what you need is partnership. The horse has to trust you and you have to trust the horse. Sophia studied him for a long moment, then said, "That sounds like something that applies to more than just riding." Dalton stiffened. "We are talking about horses, of course." She turned away to tend to Copper, and Dalton felt a flash of irritation. There had been something in her tone, a knowing quality that suggested she understood exactly what he was trying not to discuss. He did not like it. Did not like the way she seemed to look past the gruff exterior he showed the world and see the damaged man underneath. They rode back to the ranch in silence, which suited Dalton fine. Silence was safe. Silence did not require vulnerability or sharing or any of the things that led to caring about someone. When they arrived at the barn, Sophia unsaddled Copper without being told, rubbed him down properly, and made sure he had fresh water and hay. Practical, competent, learning quickly. Dalton told himself that was good, because it meant she would not need his instruction for long. "Same time tomorrow," he said curtly, then walked away before she could respond. The pattern repeated for the next week. Every morning at 7, they would ride out together, and Dalton would teach her the skills she needed to survive on the ranch. How to read the land for water sources and dangerous terrain. How to rope a calf without spooking the herd. How to check cattle for injury or disease. How to predict weather changes and find shelter when storms rolled in fast across the prairie. Sophia absorbed every lesson with quiet focus, asking smart questions and admitting when she did not understand something. She worked hard, showed up early, and never once complained about the physical demands or the long hours in the sun. And she talked to him. Not in the intrusive way some people did, prying into his past or trying to draw out confessions. Instead, she talked about small things. The way the meadowlark sang differently in Oklahoma than in Missouri. The surprising beauty of the sunset when viewed from horseback. The satisfying ache of muscles well used. She told him about her father, a bookkeeper who had loved poetry and tried his best to raise a daughter alone after his wife died in childbirth. She spoke of grief with a matter-of-fact honesty that was somehow more affecting than tears would have been. "People keep telling me it will get easier," Sophia said one morning as they checked fence lines on the northern border of the ranch. "But I do not think that is true. I think you just get used to carrying the weight." Dalton had not intended to respond, but the words came out anyway. "It does not get easier, but sometimes the weight shifts and you find a better way to carry it." Sophia looked at him with those storm cloud eyes, and for a moment Dalton felt exposed, like she could see every scar on his soul. Then she nodded and said, "Thank you for telling me the truth." They worked the rest of that day without speaking much, but something had shifted between them, a hairline crack in the walls Dalton had built. He told himself it did not matter. He was teaching her ranch skills, nothing more. When she no longer needed instruction, things would go back to the way they were before, him alone and safe and feeling nothing. But Sophia Langford was not a woman easily dismissed. In the second week of her training, Dalton learned she had been helping the cook with meals, mending clothes for the ranch hands, and organizing Richardson's chaotic office in the evenings. Tommy Chen reported that she had sat with him for an hour, asking respectful questions about his family, and listening with genuine interest to stories about his father's experiences building the railroads. She was weaving herself into the fabric of ranch life, becoming not just Richardson's niece but a real presence, someone people noticed and appreciated. "She is good for this place," Richardson said one evening when he caught Dalton checking on the horses. "Already feels less lonely having her here. I wish her father could see how strong she has become." Dalton said nothing, but he thought about strength a lot that night. There were different kinds. The strength to survive trauma, yes, but also the strength to remain open afterward, to risk caring about new people even when you knew loss was always possible. Sophia had that second kind, and Dalton was not sure whether he admired or resented her for it. The answer came during the third week, when a summer storm rolled in fast and violent, catching them miles from the ranch house. They had been checking on the southern herd, making sure the cattle had not wandered into the more dangerous ravine country, when the sky turned the color of a bruise and the wind picked up with unnatural speed. Dalton knew immediately they were in trouble. The nearest shelter was a lined shack about 2 miles east, but they would have to ride hard to reach it before the worst of the storm hit. "Follow me and do not fall behind," Dalton shouted over the rising wind. Sophia nodded, fear flickering in her eyes but her jaw set with determination. They rode fast, flint and copper stretching into gallops across the prairie, while lightning split the sky and thunder shook the ground. Rain began to fall in fat, heavy drops that quickly became a downpour, turning the world into a gray blur. Dalton kept Sophia in his peripheral vision, making sure she stayed mounted and on course. Twice her horse stumbled on the slick grass, and twice she kept her seat, trusting Copper to find his footing. They reached the lined shack just as hail began to fall, ice stones the size of marbles that stung exposed skin and spooked the horses. Dalton threw open the door, a simple wooden structure with a dirt floor and a small pot-bellied stove, and pulled Sophia inside before securing the horses in the lean-to shelter attached to the side of the building. By the time he got back inside, they were both soaked through and shivering, and the storm was raging in earnest, wind howling like a living thing and hail drumming against the roof with deafening intensity. "Are we safe here?" Sophia asked, water dripping from her braid and her lips tinged blue with cold. "Safe enough. These shacks are built to withstand storms." Dalton moved to the stove and checked the firebox, relieved to find dry kindling and a few logs stored there. He got a fire started quickly, and soon heat was radiating into the small space. "Get out of that wet shirt. There should be a blanket in the chest over there." Sophia hesitated, then turned her back and began unbuttoning her blouse with shaking fingers. Dalton looked away, focusing on building up the fire and wringing water from his own shirt. When he finally turned around, Sophia was wrapped in a faded wool blanket, her wet clothes draped over the back of the single chair to dry. Her hair hung loose now, darker when wet and falling past her shoulders in thick waves. She looked younger like this, vulnerable, and something in Dalton's chest twisted painfully. "You did good out there," he said gruffly, sitting on the floor near the stove. "Kept your head, trusted your horse. That is what keeps you alive out here." "I was terrified," Sophia admitted, sinking down to sit beside him, careful to keep the blanket wrapped around herself. "But I knew you would get us to safety, so I just focused on following you. Should not have been out that far with a storm coming." "I read the signs wrong." Dalton stared into the fire, angry at himself. "Could have gotten you killed. But you did not. We are here, we are safe, and I learned something important about surviving out here." Sophia shifted slightly, and her shoulder bumped against his. The contact was brief but electric, and Dalton felt his walls tremble. "You are a good teacher, Dalton, even if you pretend you do not care whether I learn or not. Do not know what you mean." But his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you do." Sophia's voice was soft but steady. You act like you do not want anyone close, like connection is something dangerous. But you notice everything about the people around you. You left extra hay for Copper yesterday when you saw he was still hungry. You told Tommy about a better way to mend that saddle he was working on. You check on Richardson's arthritis without him having to ask. You care, Dalton Pierce. You just pretend you do not. Dalton's throat tightened. You do not know anything about me. I know you lost someone, maybe more than one someone. I know you blame yourself for something that probably was not your fault. I know you are so afraid of being hurt again that you have convinced yourself it is better to feel nothing at all. Sophia turned to look at him fully, and in the firelight, her eyes were impossibly gentle. I know because I felt the same way after my father died. I wanted to close myself off, to never let anyone matter again, because the pain of losing him was almost unbearable. But then I realized something. The love I had for him, that was worth the pain. All the good years, the laughter, the memories, they matter more than the ending. And if I close myself off now, then the loss wins. The grief gets to define the rest of my life. I refuse to let that happen. You do not understand. Dalton's voice came out rough, almost broken. I lost my wife and son. Both of them, same week. I was not there when they needed me. I was off doing my job, thinking I was keeping people safe, and I came home to graves already dug. I never got to say goodbye, never got to tell Sarah I loved her one more time or hold Daniel, or... He stopped, the words choking him. He had not spoken about this to anyone in 3 years, had kept it locked away in the deepest part of himself where it could not hurt him constantly. But it hurt now. It hurt like it had just happened, and Dalton realized that keeping the grief locked away had not made it smaller or less powerful. It had just made him smaller, less alive, a ghost moving through the world without really living in it. Sophia's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers lacing through his with gentle pressure. I am so sorry. That is a terrible loss, and you have every right to your grief. But Dalton, they are gone. You are still here, and you have a choice about what you do with the life you still have. I do not want to care about anyone again. The admission felt like defeat. It hurts too much when they leave. I know, but is this better? Being alone, keeping everyone at a distance, going through the motions without really living. Sophia's thumb traced small circles on the back of his hand. I do not think so. I think you are drowning, and you are so afraid of reaching for help that you would rather just sink. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing and accepting were different things, and Dalton had spent 3 years perfecting the art of not accepting anything. I do not know how to do anything else anymore, he whispered. Then let me teach you. Sophia squeezed his hand. The way you taught me about horses. One day at a time, one small step at a time. You do not have to tear down all your walls at once. Just maybe open a window, let a little light in. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the fire burn while the storm raged outside. Dalton felt something shifting inside him, ice that had been frozen solid for years beginning to crack and melt. It was terrifying and painful and strangely hopeful all at once. When he finally spoke again, his voice was steadier. My wife Sarah, she used to sing while she cooked. Terrible voice, could not carry a tune to save her life, but she sang anyway because it made her happy. Daniel had her eyes brown like creek stones. He was only 3 months old when he died, still had that baby smell, milk and innocence. Dalton paused, swallowing hard. I have not said their names out loud in 3 years. Felt like if I did not talk about them, maybe it would not be real. But it is real. They were real, and they mattered, and the fact that you lost them does not change how much they meant to you. Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, the gesture natural and comforting. Thank you for telling me about them. Outside, the storm began to ease, the hail stopping and the rain settling into a steady downpour. Inside the line shack, something new was beginning, fragile as spring ice but real nonetheless. Dalton did not pull away from Sophia's touch, did not retreat back behind his walls. Instead, he sat with the discomfort of connection, and found that it was not quite as unbearable as he had convinced himself it would be. They stayed in the line shack until the storm passed completely, talking in quiet voices about loss and survival, and the small moments of grace that made life worth living despite its inevitable sorrows. When they finally rode back to the ranch, hours later than expected, Richardson met them at the barn with relief evident on his weathered face. "Was about to send out a search party," he said, looking between Dalton and Sophia with sharp, assessing eyes. "Everyone all right?" "We are fine," Sophia said, dismounting and immediately moving to care for Copper. "Dalton got us to shelter in time. I learned a lot about storm safety." Richardson nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on Dalton for a moment longer before he turned back toward the main house. "Glad you are both safe. Sophia, come get some hot food in you when you are finished with your horse." Dalton worked in silence, removing Flint's tack and rubbing him down thoroughly. He was aware of Sophia moving through the same motions with Copper, her presence no longer an intrusion but something almost comfortable. When they finally finished and walked out of the barn together, she paused at the point where their paths would diverge. "Thank you," she said simply, "for keeping me safe and for trusting me with your story. Sophia." Her name felt strange on his tongue, intimate in a way that last names were not. She looked up at him, waiting. "I am not good at this, at letting people in. I will probably mess it up." A smile touched her lips, soft and understanding. "Then we will learn together. Good night, Dalton." She walked away toward the main house, and Dalton stood watching her go, feeling something dangerously close to hope stirring in his chest. It scared him more than any storm or wild horse or gunfight ever had. But it also made him feel alive for the first time in 3 years, and that was worth the fear. The days that followed brought subtle changes to their routine. Dalton still arrived at 7 o'clock sharp to continue Sophia's training, but the lessons felt different now. Less like obligation, and more like time he actively wanted to spend with her. She had moved past the basics and was learning more advanced skills. How to doctor sick cattle, how to repair tack and equipment, how to read trail signs and track animals. She was a natural, picking up everything quickly and showing genuine enthusiasm for the work. But it was the moments between the lessons that mattered most. The conversations while they rode across the prairie, talking about everything and nothing. The shared meals when Sophia would bring lunch out to wherever they were working, sitting in the shade of a cottonwood tree and trading stories about their vastly different childhoods. The quiet companionship of working side by side, mending fence or sorting cattle, communicating more through glances and small gestures than words. Dalton found himself thinking about her at odd moments throughout the day. The way she laughed, full-throated and genuine, when something truly amused her. The fierce concentration on her face when she was learning a new skill. The gentleness in her hands when she worked with the animals. The way she looked at him, like he was someone worth knowing despite all his rough edges and deliberate distance. It was Tommy who finally called him out on it. They were working together to brand the new calves, hot and dirty work that required focus and coordination, and Dalton had found his attention wandering toward where Sophia was helping Richardson sort paperwork on the main house porch. "You got it bad," Tommy said with a knowing grin. "Got what bad?" Dalton growled, forcing his eyes back to the calf they were processing. "Miss Sophia, You watch her like she is water and you have been crossing the desert for 40 days. Tommy released the calf and stood, stretching his back. Not saying it is a bad thing. She is a good woman, and you are less of a grumpy bastard since she arrived. Mind your own business, Chen. Just saying, life is short. My father used to tell me about the workers who died building those railroads, men who never got to see their families again, because they were too focused on the work, on surviving day to day. He said the tragedy was not just that they died, but that they never really lived. Tommy clapped Dalton on the shoulder. You got a second chance here. Be ashamed to waste it. Dalton wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat because Tommy was right, and they both knew it. He was falling for Sophia Langford, this determined woman who had somehow seen past his defenses and refused to be pushed away. The realization should have sent him running for the hills. Instead, it just made him want to try harder, to be the kind of man who deserved her attention. That evening, after the work was done and the other hands had gathered for their usual card game, Dalton did something he had not done in years. He washed thoroughly, put on a clean shirt, and walked to the main house. His heart was hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape, and his palms were sweating despite the cooling evening air. He knocked on the door, half hoping no one would answer. Richardson opened it, surprise flickering across his face before settling into something that looked like satisfaction. Pierce, what can I do for you? Is Sophia available? I would like to speak with her. The words felt clumsy and formal, but Dalton pushed through. If she is not busy. She is reading on the back porch. Go on around. Richardson stepped aside, a small smile tugging at his mouth. And Dalton, about damn time. Dalton walked around the house, his boots loud on the wooden planks, and found Sophia exactly where Richardson had said she would be. She was curled in a rocking chair with a book, the last light of sunset casting golden shadows across her face. She looked up when she heard him approach, and something warm kindled in her eyes. Dalton, this is a surprise. Is something wrong? No, I just... He stopped, trying to organize thoughts that felt jumbled and inadequate. Would you take a walk with me? Sophia set her book aside and stood, smoothing her skirt. I would like that. They walked together away from the house, following the path toward the creek where moonlight was just beginning to silver the water. Neither spoke for several minutes, the silence comfortable but charged with anticipation. Finally, near the bank where willows trailed their branches in the current, Dalton stopped and turned to face her. I am not good with words, he started, then forced himself to continue. But I need you to know that these past weeks, getting to know you, teaching you, talking with you, it has meant something to me. More than I expected, more than I was ready for. Sophia's expression softened and she took a step closer. It has meant something to me too. I told you I lost my wife and son. What I did not say is that I made a decision after they died to never let anyone close again. Seemed safer that way, easier. I could not lose what I did not have. Dalton's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. But then you showed up and you did not give me a choice. You just walked past every wall I put up like they were not even there, and now I am standing here feeling things I swore I would never feel again. What are you feeling? Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper, scared, hopeful, alive. Dalton met her eyes, holding her gaze steady. I am feeling like maybe I could try again, at caring about someone, at letting someone care about me, if that someone was you. Sophia's smile was radiant, transforming her whole face. I have been hoping you would say something like that. I know I am forward, that a proper lady should probably wait for the man to make all the overtures, but Dalton, I have had feelings for you since the second week of lessons. You are kind and strong and honorable, even when you are trying to pretend you are none of those things. You make me feel safe and challenged and seen all at once." "I am broken," Dalton said, needing her to understand. "Still grieving, probably always will be on some level. I am not going to be easy to be with. I do not need easy, I need real." Sophia reached up and laid her palm against his cheek, the touch gentle but grounding. "I have grief too, remember? We can carry those weights together, help each other find better ways to hold them." Dalton turned his head slightly, pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture that felt both natural and terrifying in its intimacy. "I do not know how to do this, how to court a woman, how to open my heart again. We will figure it out as we go." Sophia's other hand found his, linking their fingers together. "One day at a time, remember?" He kissed her then, leaning down to capture her lips with his in a kiss that was tender and searching and full of promise. Sophia responded immediately, rising on her toes to press closer, her free hand sliding up to curl around the back of his neck. The kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and alive, 3 years of locked-away feeling breaking free all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to try," he promised, "to let you in, to be present, to not run when things get difficult. That is all I ask." Sophia kissed him again, softer this time. "We will try together." They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, and if the other ranch hands noticed Dalton's lighter mood the next morning, they were wise enough not to comment on it directly. But Tommy caught his eye and nodded approval, and Richardson looked positively smug during breakfast when Dalton and Sophia kept stealing glances at each other across the table. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Dalton had experienced before. With Sarah, everything had been straightforward and simple. They had grown up in the same town, known each other since childhood, fallen in love as easily as breathing. This was different. He and Sophia were both carrying damage, both learning how to trust again while navigating their own grief. But perhaps that made it stronger. 2 people choosing each other with full knowledge of how painful love could be. They stole moments together whenever they could. Early morning rides before the day's work began, just the 2 of them and the prairie stretching endlessly in all directions. Evening walks after dinner, talking about their hopes for the future and their memories of the past. Sophia told him about her father's love of Byron and Keats, and how she still caught herself wanting to share interesting passages with him before remembering he was gone. Dalton told her about Sarah's terrible singing, and how Daniel used to grip his finger with his whole tiny fist, and found that the memories hurt less when shared with someone who listened with compassion rather than pity. Richardson gave them space, but also made his approval clear. "You are good for each other," he told Dalton one afternoon when they were repairing the barn roof together. "I have not seen you smile once in the 2 years you have worked here, and now you do it without even realizing. That girl is special." "I know," Dalton said simply. "I am trying not to mess it up. Then ask her to marry you before some other man realizes how remarkable she is." The thought had been circling in Dalton's mind for weeks, but hearing it said out loud made it real and immediate. He wanted to marry Sophia, wanted to build a life with her, wanted to wake up every morning knowing she was beside him. But the fear was still there, lurking beneath the hope. What if something happened to her? What if he lost her the way he had lost Sarah? Could he survive that kind of loss twice? It was Sophia herself who finally addressed his unspoken fears. They were sitting by the creek on a Sunday afternoon, Dalton's back against a tree and Sophia leaning against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. The summer was waning into early autumn, the air carrying the first hints of coolness that promised changing seasons. "You are thinking too hard," Sophia said, tilting her head back to look at him. "I can feel the tension in your shoulders, just thinking about the future." Dalton tightened his arms around her slightly. "About what I want and what I am afraid of. Tell me." "I want to marry you." The words came out plain and honest. "I want to build a life with you, have children with you if God wills it, grow old beside you. But I am terrified that if I let myself want all of that, something will happen to take it away." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, watching the creek flow past. Then she said, "My father told me something once, right before my mother died. I was too young to really understand it then, but it has stayed with me. He said that love is always a risk, because loving someone means giving them the power to hurt you. But the alternative is living a half-life, always holding back, never fully experiencing the joy and connection that makes being human worthwhile. He said my mother was worth the risk, and even though losing her broke his heart, he never regretted a single day they had together." She turned in his arms so she could face him properly. "I cannot promise I will not die, Dalton. None of us can promise that. Life is uncertain and often unfair. But I can promise that every day we have together, I will choose you. I will love you fully and honestly, and I will do my best to build a life with you that is worth the risk. Is not that enough?" Dalton looked at this remarkable woman who had crashed into his carefully controlled world and turned everything upside down, and he realized it was enough. More than enough. The alternative was going back to his half-life, existing but not living, and he could not do that anymore. Sophia had reminded him what it meant to be fully alive, and he was not going to throw that away because of fear. "Marry me," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "Not someday, not eventually. Soon. Marry me and let us start building that life right now." Sophia's smile was brilliant, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Yes, yes, Dalton Pierce, I will marry you." He kissed her then, pouring every ounce of love and commitment and hope into that kiss. And when they finally broke apart, both laughing with the giddy happiness of new beginnings, the future did not seem quite so frightening anymore. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, in early October of 1882, when the Oklahoma prairie was painted gold and orange with autumn colors. It was a small ceremony held at the ranch, with the local preacher officiating and the ranch hands serving as witnesses. Richardson walked Sophia down the makeshift aisle they had created in the main yard, his eyes suspiciously bright as he placed her hand in Dalton's. Tommy Chen had organized the other hands to decorate with wildflowers and ribbon, and someone had brought a fiddle to play cheerful music afterward. Dalton had bought a simple gold band from the jeweler in town, using most of his savings but not caring about the cost. When he slipped it onto Sophia's finger and spoke his vows, promising to love and cherish her for all the days of his life, he meant every word with a depth of feeling that still surprised him. Sophia's vows were equally heartfelt, her voice steady and clear as she promised to stand beside him through whatever joys and sorrows lay ahead. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Dalton kissed his new bride, the ranch hands cheered and whistled their approval. Richardson had organized a celebration with food and drink, and for hours they ate and danced and celebrated the union of two people who had found each other against all odds. Dalton danced with his wife, holding her close as the fiddle played and the stars came out overhead, and felt more at peace than he had in years. They spent their wedding night in the small cabin Richardson had offered them, a 2-room structure on the edge of the ranch property that would serve as their home. It was simple but sturdy, with a real bed and a fireplace and windows that looked out over the prairie. As Dalton carried Sophia across the threshold, both of them laughing at the old-fashioned gesture, he felt the last of his walls crumble completely. This was his wife, his partner, his second chance at happiness, and he was going to spend every day proving himself worthy of her trust. Their lovemaking that night was tender and passionate, an affirmation of their commitment and a celebration of their connection. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Sophia traced patterns on Dalton's chest and said, "I love you. I know we said it in our vows, but I wanted to say it again, just us, no one else listening. I love you too." Dalton pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing past all my walls and stubbornness. Thank you for finally letting me in." Sophia yawned, nestling closer. "We are going to have a good life together, Dalton. I can feel it." He believed her. Against all his expectations and despite all his fears, he believed her. The months that followed proved her right. They settled into married life with surprising ease, working together on the ranch during the day and building their home together in the evenings. Sophia continued to help Richardson with the business side of the ranch, her education and quick mind making her invaluable for managing accounts and correspondence. Dalton took on more responsibility as well, functioning as Richardson's de facto foreman and training new hands when they were hired. Their cabin became a real home, filled with small touches that reflected both of them. Books from Sophia's collection lined a shelf Dalton built. His rifle and gear had their proper place by the door. They acquired a dog, a cattle-dog mix that had been born on a neighboring ranch, and named him Scout for his tendency to explore everything. On cold nights, they would sit by the fire, Sophia reading aloud while Dalton worked on leather repairs or carved small figurines from wood, a hobby he had taken up as a boy and rediscovered. The physical intimacy between them deepened as well, moving beyond the initial passion into something richer and more complex. Dalton learned the landscape of his wife's body, what made her sigh with pleasure, what made her laugh, what made her cling to him with desperate need. Sophia proved to be both tender and adventurous, unafraid to express her desires and equally attentive to his. Their bedroom became a sanctuary where all pretense fell away, and they could simply be themselves, vulnerable and honest and entirely present with each other. By spring of 1883, Sophia suspected she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Dalton, wanting to be sure before raising hopes that might be disappointed. When she finally shared the news one evening after dinner, Dalton's reaction was complex. Joy and fear warred on his face, memories of Daniel mixing with hope for this new child. "Are you scared?" Sophia asked, taking his hands in hers. "Terrified," Dalton admitted, "but also happy. I want a family with you. I am just afraid of history repeating itself. We will get the best medical care available. We will be careful and prepared." Sophia squeezed his hands. "And we will face whatever comes together. You are not alone this time, Dalton." That made all the difference. Throughout the pregnancy, Dalton was attentive and protective without being overbearing, and when complications arose in the final weeks, he stayed calm and got Sophia to the doctor in Ardmore immediately. Their son was born in November of 1883, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Daniel Robert, honoring both Dalton's lost son and Richardson, who had become like family to them both. Holding his newborn son for the first time, Dalton felt tears streaming down his face, a mixture of grief and joy too powerful to contain. This did not replace the Daniel he had lost. Nothing could do that. But this was new life, new love, new possibility. And sitting beside him in the bed, exhausted but smiling, was Sophia, who had given him all of this by refusing to let him hide from life. "Thank you," he whispered, leaning over to kiss her forehead, "for everything, for this." "We did this together," Sophia said, reaching up to wipe the tears from his cheeks. "This is our family, Dalton, and it is going to be wonderful." She was right. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. Drought years when the cattle struggled and money was tight. A hard winter that tested everyone's endurance. The normal ups and downs of ranch life and parenthood. But through it all, Dalton and Sophia faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah Grace born in 1885, and another son named Thomas James in 1888, named for Tommy Chen, who had become one of their closest friends. Richardson lived to see all 3 grandchildren, as he considered them, before passing peacefully in his sleep in 1890. He left the ranch to Sophia, with the stipulation that Dalton would manage it, a gesture that surprised no one who knew them. Young Daniel grew up tall and quiet like his father, with a gift for working with horses that made him invaluable on the ranch. Sarah inherited her mother's determined spirit and quick mind, becoming a teacher in Ardmore and eventually opening her own school. Thomas was the wild one, adventurous and charming, who eventually tried his hand at everything from cowboying to prospecting, before settling down with a wife and becoming a rancher himself. As the years passed and the Wild West began to fade into memory, replaced by increasing civilization and settlement, Dalton would sometimes reflect on how different his life had turned out from what he expected that day in 1882, when he stood at an unmarked grave and wondered if whiskey or memories would kill him first. Neither had, because Sophia Langford had arrived with her storm-cloud eyes and her refusal to accept his walls, and she had saved him from himself. One evening in 1910, 28 years after they first met, Dalton and Sophia sat on the porch of their cabin, now expanded and improved but still fundamentally the same home they had started in. Their children were grown with families of their own, the ranch was thriving, and they had grandchildren who climbed on their laps and demanded stories about the old days. "You remember when I told you I was too broken to love again?" Dalton asked, his hand finding Sophia's and linking their fingers together in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "I remember. I also remember telling you that you just needed to let me teach you, one day at a time." Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, her hair now streaked with silver but her spirit as vibrant as ever. "I think we did pretty well, do you not agree? Better than well. You gave me everything, Sophia. A family, a home, a reason to keep living." Dalton kissed the top of her head. "You saw past all my walls, and when I tried to keep you out, you just kept coming back until I did not want to keep you out anymore. Because you were worth it. You always were, even when you could not see it yourself." Sophia looked up at him, her eyes still that remarkable storm cloud gray, and smiled. "I love you, Dalton Pierce. Thank you for letting me in all those years ago. I love you too. Thank you for not giving up on a bitter cowboy who thought he was better off alone." Dalton pulled her closer, contentment settling over him like a warm blanket. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and beautiful, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear their grandchildren playing. This was the life he had never dared hope for, the happiness he had been certain was lost to him forever. But Sophia had seen past his walls and refused to be kept out, and in doing so, she had given him everything worth living for.